Father, you are good, and we thank you for being with us tonight. Lord, I think about the words of that song, and I ask that you would help us to learn and grasp even more in our life how powerful your name is. And Lord, we pray that you would continue to meet with us tonight, and we will bring you glory in Jesus' name. Amen. Deb, it's yours. And your mic is somewhere. I got to find it for you.
Thank you. I'm not very loud, so I appreciate the help with the microphone. How's everybody doing? My name's Deb Schaefer. I work for 1016 Recovery Network, and I want to thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. I'm kind of excited to get to do this with a big group. This is number 31 for me of doing this presentation in the last 6 weeks, which should let you know I'm a little passionate about this particular topic. I work with people in recovery. I work with people who are still suffering from addiction, and making marijuana legal is not in the best interest of Michigan. Whether you believe it should be recreationally legal or not, this particular ballot proposal is not written very well. So that's kind of what I want to share with you this evening. Couple of things. We work with the Legacy Center in Midland. Michelle and Catherine helped me work on this presentation, and it's been fact-checked by 4 independent agencies. And we did that because we wanted to make sure we were getting the true facts out there. At the end, there will be a slide that has all of the places that we found the information, so don't take my word for it. Go online, look for yourself, find your own answers. But hopefully I'll get you started on the right questions. So the first thing I'm going to do is share some goodies. So I'm going to pass this around. Please take one, pass it around. Just a little candy for everybody. And while that's going around, if you want to go to the next slide, please. So the objectives for this presentation are to provide information on what today's marijuana looks like. This is not your grandpa's marijuana, your dad's marijuana, your mom's marijuana from the 1970s or 80s. Describe how legalization will negatively affect the youth in our area. Because that's really who I focus on when I work prevention, is the youth who work in the schools. Explain the legislative landscape. So I'm kind of going to show you the difference between what Michigan is proposing and what's been legalized in other states and how we stack up. We're going to compare a little bit about what's going on in Colorado, and then provide resources for you to help you make the best decision that you can. If you can go to the next one, please. So today's marijuana. Most of us know marijuana kind of in leaf form. That's how we kind of think of it. We think of smoking a joint. That is a very different thing than what is today's marijuana. So today's marijuana is not only very, very high in THC. THC is the part of marijuana that makes you feel euphoric. It's the part that releases dopamine in your brain and makes you feel high. So the joint is still a thing, but the marijuana that goes into it is now between 14 and 20% THC. When I was in high school back in the 80s, it was between 4 and 6% THC. So the level of that drug in this plant that makes you high has gone up. This month in High Times magazine, they wanted everyone to know that the highest concentration of marijuana is in a new strain called Bruce Banner. If any of you are Marvel fans, that's the Hulk. That is being grown exclusively in Michigan. So they're letting people know, hey, they're going to vote, and as soon as it's legal there, go to Michigan, they have the best stuff. But most of the folks using marijuana are not smoking it. They're dabbing. How many have heard of dabbing? There's a few, okay. So they make wax. Wax is made by soaking marijuana in butane, and what drips out the bottom becomes wax. That is then used to produce shatter, which can be up to 80 to 90% THC. And the newest thing, you'll see a picture down here in the corner, or kind of in the middle, is crystalline. This came out about 6 weeks ago in California. It's completely legal there. It is 100% THC, and they snort it like they do crystal meth. It is incredibly dangerous. They've had 10 overdoses in the 6 weeks it's been legal there. So when I hear people say, but it doesn't kill anybody, that's not true. It kills people every single day, not just from overdosing, but from other things which we'll get to. The other thing that's a big thing in the states where this is legal, and here in Michigan with medical marijuana, is edibles. The edibles can be anything from a cookie to a brownie to butter, to a lot of different things. But on those edibles, they're not controlled by the FDA for dose or potency. So you don't get a prescription for marijuana. You get a card from your doctor that says, this person might benefit from the use of marijuana medically. But there's no dose. There's no take this 3 times a day as needed for pain. None of that happens. So the edibles may have a dosage on them, so maybe it's a cookie. And 1/8 of a cookie is a dose. Now, I don't know about the rest of you. I've never eaten 1/8 of a cookie in my entire life, especially if it's a Girl Scout cookie and it's a Thin Mint. That is also a new strain. Girl Scout cookie is a new strain of marijuana. So the edibles are a big thing. You can see them kind of across the middle there. Many of them are geared toward young people. The other thing that things are very discreet. There's vape pens are all the rage right now. People think if they vape, then it's better than smoking. Some of the new vape pens look like flash drives. So it looks like a flash drive. You can plug it in your computer. It's called a Juul. And kids have them in school. You cannot smell marijuana being vaped. So there is no odor. And it plugs into their computer just like a flash drive. So if the teacher looks at it and doesn't know what they're looking at, it just looks like a memory drive. It doesn't look like, oh, they're going to go in the bathroom and smoke that and get high. The other thing that we know that our youth are doing right here in Gladwin County with the wax is melting it into their lip balm, and then they just put their little Carmex right in the microwave, put the wax in it, stir it up. They can get high right in school just putting their lip balm on. So, not your parents' marijuana, not the marijuana of my generation. It's very dangerous, it's highly concentrated, and folks are dying because they're overdosing. The other thing we're seeing in our emergency rooms is called cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. Don't ask me to say that 3 times fast. It took me a while to figure out how to say it. What this is, it's ear infections, a horribly sore throat, kind of like you feel like you have strep throat, and horrible stomach cramps. And the only thing they're finding that is any relief at all is a hot bath or a hot shower. They've tried opiates, they've tried everything, nothing works until the marijuana is out of that person's system. It's happening to chronic users, and it's taken a while to figure out what the cause is, but now they know. If you can go to the next one, please. So the potency of seized marijuana in the U.S., now the chart only goes to 2010 because it's very difficult to do research on marijuana in the U.S. because federally it is still a Schedule I illegal drug. So the federal government doesn't give out a lot of grants to study it because it's not legal federally. However, the University of Massachusetts got some funding, and from 1983 to 2010, the potency of what was seized by the police went up 121%. That is a huge jump, and that's 8 years ago. And we know it's just gotten worse because the potency is kind of the thing. When you have a beer, you know how much alcohol is in a 10-ounce, 12-ounce can of beer. You have no idea the potency of what you may be getting with this. Go ahead and go on to the next one, please. So the other argument I hear from people, well, there are medical benefits. That is absolutely true. There are medical benefits to the marijuana plant. There are 100 chemicals in a marijuana plant. Every chemical in there doesn't have medical benefits, but some do. And the FDA is actually looking at it. They have now legalized 3 different drugs that have marijuana components in them. 2 for chemo-induced nausea, and 1 also for nerve pain. 1 for child epilepsy, which is the Epidiolex. And they're working on Sativex, which I'm actually really excited about because it's for MS pain, and that's something that I've been dealing with for the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm kind of excited about that one. So when people say, well, the FDA doesn't know what they're doing, the FDA does. They're looking at it. They're doing research. responsibly the way they need to do it to make sure that we're not harmed. If you want to go to the next one, please. So some of the challenges. How many of you have heard people say, it's not addictive? That is a lie. That is a myth. It is absolutely addictive. Right now, in the medical field, they say anything with over 16% THC is considered a hard narcotic. It reacts in your bloodstream like a narcotic. We're looking at things that are 80 to 90% THC, all the way up to 100. So this hits your system like an opiate. Marijuana causes impairments. Hazardous vehicle operation, that is the biggest one, because people are high much longer than they think they are, and they're impaired much longer than they think they are, depending on the potency. We know in our research, in one of the curriculums that we use in the schools, it's from Harvard Medical, and it says 90 minutes after smoking marijuana, you still can't pass the driving test. So the sobriety test on the side of the road, can't pass it. And people have said, oh, well, they can't tell. Well, they can now. There's a stick test they're testing on the west side of the state. It's a saliva test. Test for 15 different chemicals, including THC, and they will know if you're impaired. Now, what they'll say the legal level is, I don't know. That's going to be determined because it's not in this ballot proposal. It's not in this bill. High levels of THC can cause psychosis. We have that happening in our emergency rooms. One of the programs that I run is called Project Assert, and we have a recovery coach in the emergency room right here in Gladwin. We have one in Clare. It's actually the same guy. He goes back and forth. Gratiot, Isabella, Mecosta, Osceola, and Midland. So right in the emergency room, and we're seeing this. It's not new. And then marijuana users are 2.6 times more likely to begin using other substances. Is marijuana a gateway drug? We hear this all the time. Is it a gateway drug? Not for everybody who uses it. Some people drink a beer, and they never drink more than one ever in their lives. Other people drink beer and become an alcoholic. Okay? This is not a gateway drug for everyone, but it is a gateway drug for people who are genetically predisposed to become addicted. Next slide, please. So what are the negative impacts on our youth? Go ahead to the next one. So that we know that the perception of risk has a correlation to the use. So if youth don't believe that marijuana is dangerous, they're going to use it, right? Well, it's legal in other states. It's completely natural. Well, genetically it's been modified about 20,000 times, so it's no longer natural. And it was never, edibles don't grow on trees. They don't grow on that bush. So I would argue that part. But youth see their parents use it. Most of the youth we see who are using are stealing it from their parents' medical marijuana. Go ahead to the next one. So unfortunately, we don't have Gladwin County data because Gladwin did not participate in the Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth last year. We do have just next door to you Claire's data. So students who felt using marijuana was a great risk, in 7th grade it was 85%. This was 2017. However, when you look at the 11th graders, it was only 8%. This data is available on the Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth website. Age at first use, for those who've tried it, is all the way down to 11. It was at 14 for the older kids, but the younger kids, it's all the way down to age 11. And then use in the last 30 days, this is only the ones who admitted it, so we know the numbers are actually probably 3 times what these numbers show. If 15% are admitting to using in the last 30 days, probably 30 to 45% are actually doing it. That's kind of scary. That's Clare County. It's not really any different coming across that county line. You can hit the next one. So in Colorado, what's happening with youth access? 30-day use among youth has increased 15.8% in 5 years. That is a huge increase in just 5 years. And the reason we look at Colorado is it's been legal there the longest, and their policy looks the most like what Michigan is looking at. Nationally, the 10 states with the highest rate of youth marijuana have some form of legalized, whether it's recreational or medicinal. they have some form of legalized marijuana. Michigan comes in about 16. If you want to hit the next one. Right now we're in the red. I have no doubt it's going to get worse if this ballot proposal continues. A couple of things this ballot proposal is missing. So they wrote this through petition. So I've had people say, well, what legislators are responsible? None. This was done through petition. 5% of Michigan legal voters signed this ballot proposal. It was written by the people who want it legal. It was not written by any of our legislators. They said, we want to legalize this like alcohol. Alcohol regulations are 320 plus pages. This is 22. They missed a couple things. So it's written very poorly. It says in this legislation you cannot you cannot sell this to anyone under 21, and you will go to jail if you do that. However, all it says is you shouldn't give it to anyone under 21. There is no penalty written in. Not because we think they did that on purpose, they just missed it. It's not there. So I can give this to an 8-year-old with absolutely no consequences. That's scary. That's really scary. Okay, if you can go on to the next one. So we know with access, again, use goes up. Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I certainly remember sneaking a couple beers from the refrigerator when I was in high school. Now, I'm standing in a church. Maybe everybody here is not that person, but our kids use what is available to them. So if you're going to use this, it needs to be locked up. There's no regulation saying you have to. There's nothing saying, make sure this isn't a locked container in your home. So it's there, and it's going to be accessible. Go ahead and go on to the next one, please. So why should we care? Well, the human brain stops developing at about age 25. Use of marijuana, we know from, again, a Harvard study, that use of marijuana before the end of brain development can lose you up to 8 IQ points. I had a youth look at me and say, you mean this will make me dumb? Like, well, I don't know if that's the right terminology, but I know that if your IQ is, say, 130, it could go down to about 128. No, I probably didn't do that right. 122. There we go. I'm not a math whiz. Increased absenteeism. Our kids going to want to go to school in the morning if they're high. That's kind of a no-brainer. We know they're going to miss school, which means they're going to have a decrease in academic performance. It all kind of fits. Risk of mental health problems, depression, anxiety, and social problems. I've had many people say to me, well, I use it for my anxiety. Well, the first time, it may get rid of your anxiety. It may chill you right out. But it doesn't continue to do that, just like alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant. Marijuana is a depressant. As it gets in your system, as it builds up, it causes you to be more depressed. You have to take more of it just to feel normal. Other social problems. How many of you have heard alcohol referred to as liquid courage? Can't go out and dance till I've had a couple beers and then I'll be okay. It's the same way with this in a social setting. Oh, if I just have a little bit of marijuana, I'll have the confidence to go ask that girl to dance. Or whatever. Increased risk of developing schizophrenia and psychosis in some people. Now, this, again, is not in everybody, but it is in enough people that it's a concern. It's about 10 to 12% of the population who are using now, which is a pretty high percentage. Potential for poisoning from marijuana edibles. Strengths vary. Can be very small, less than 1 gummy bear. Now you know why you got the gummy bears. And then there's a delayed onset. So we talked about the cookie. There's things like butter. You're supposed to use 1 ounce of butter, put it on your toast. It can take 30 to 45 minutes for that to take effect. If you don't know that, if you haven't read the label, or if it wasn't on the label, you don't know that. Where did the gummy bears end up? He's got them back there. Has anybody got a package I can... Okay, so this package says Harbo gummy bears. The only difference between this package and the one in Colorado is an L. They're called Harblo. Now, does a 3-year-old know the difference? No. And one gummy bear can put a 3-year-old in the hospital. This is not marketed to you and me. This is marketed to children. This will be perfectly legal to do if we let this pass, because it says marijuana and all of its derivatives. All. That means anything they want to produce. There's cannabis beer that has come out. Coors has one. Corona has one. Coca-Cola's come out with a beverage with CBD oil in it. I have no idea what the benefit of that is. There is no medical reason to put that in Coca-Cola. Of course, Coca-Cola started with cocaine in it, so. Thank you. So when parents use, we know youth are impacted. There's a decreased perception of risk. If mom and dad are using, well, it's not hurting them any. Increased access to the product and increased negative health effects due to secondhand smoke. So we don't know yet what the effect of this is on the unborn fetus, because there's not enough research to tell us, but we do know that in at least 3 of the counties that I serve, 30% of moms that go in and give birth are testing positive for marijuana. It's not legal yet. 30%. In Colorado, if you look up the impact study, it's called the HIDA impact study on marijuana and what's happened in Colorado, they've actually shut down a couple of shops because the people in those shops were telling women, this will get rid of your nausea when you're pregnant. It's good for you. Well, it's not good for your baby. If it's losing IQ points in youth use, what's going to happen when it's used during development of that brain? We don't know. So what we've asked, we know it crosses the placenta, so WIC is now asking moms, if you're going to use, please don't breastfeed. So for WIC to come out and say, don't breastfeed, that's against everything WIC believes. However, excuse me, we know this is very bad for that fetus and for that baby. So please don't, because we know it's going through. So what does the legislation look like? Go ahead to the next one, please. So the definitions, medical marijuana is the use of marijuana to benefit various medical conditions. Again, there's no regulation on the dose, strength, or purity, and no consistent safety standards for consumption. So your doctor doesn't tell you how much to take. That's a little scary. If they give you a drug after surgery, they tell you, take this every 6 hours for pain. There is none of that with this. Recreational marijuana means the use of marijuana to experience high. There is no other reason to use marijuana. It doesn't taste good with your pizza. It's not going to make your steak taste better. It doesn't go good with red wine and chocolate. The only reason to use this is to get high. Legalization means establishing parameters for legal use, sale, and purchase. Decriminalization, which is what Colorado folks thought they were voting on, would mean, so let's say I come across Phil, and I'm going to pick on him because I know his name, in the park and he's smoking marijuana. I'm going to take his marijuana. I'm going to offer him treatment, but I'm going to go after the dealer and I'm not going to prosecute Phil. But I'm going to confiscate his drugs. That's decriminalization. It's a little different than legalization. Commercialization means established industries for financial gain. Go ahead and go to the next one, please. So the big picture. Federally, marijuana is still a Schedule I illegal drug. So how many of you have been to Mount Pleasant? So I live in Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant rests on an Indian reservation and is federal land. That means this can't happen there, even if it's made legal. They're still trying to figure out how are we going to sell this in Mount Pleasant when half the county is the reservation. I mean, half the county is still owned by the tribe, so. And it's not the only tribe in Michigan or in the states where it's become legal, so it's an issue. And the tribe does not want this legal, by the way. Several states have legalized medically or recreationally. State laws governing medical marijuana are different from laws that govern recreational, so that's different in each state. And then funding to local municipalities will go away. So many municipalities, townships, voted to allow so many dispensaries because they were going to get a tax break if they did that. If this becomes legal, recreationally, all of those tax breaks go away. That is buried in the Dispensary Act. It's not in the new ballot proposal. It's buried in that act that becomes legal December 15th. All those dispensaries can open up. December 15th. But all that tax money that would have come back to the townships and the cities that voted on it goes away if this gets voted November 6th to be legal. So the potential imbalance between tax revenue and social costs, marijuana-related traffic deaths in Colorado went from 33 in 2013 to 138 in 2017. That's a big increase. 57% of marijuana users in Colorado admit to driving within 2 hours after consumption. No idea how much the potency of what they used and how long it stays in the bloodstream. Marijuana-related ER visits increased 35% after legalization, and hospitalizations up 72%. Most of those are children, about 78% are children, because of edibles that they've gotten a hold of. They didn't know they should only eat an eighth of the cookie either. All crime rates have gone up 10.8%. And then there's the employment challenges. So these ones are huge. All the construction workers have to pass a drug screen to run that heavy equipment. They're having to bring construction workers in from other states. They're having to bring road crews in from other states. That's a little scary. So marijuana was approved by voter initiative back in 2008 to be approved for medical use. In December of 2017, the Facilities Act was enacted. And again, it allows for those municipalities, townships, villages to opt in for commercialization, select the type and number of facilities they want, create regulations around local facilities, and once opted in, a municipality can only opt out with a local ballot initiative. So if you're, I don't know if Gladwin opted in or out. Does anybody know? I don't know. I should know. I should look that up. But once you're in, you can't opt out without a vote from your local registered voters. And then some municipalities did select to opt out. I know Big Rapids opted out. I know Beaverton opted out. I don't know about Gladwin. So here's kind of the timeline of what's been going on. In April, the Michigan Board of Canvassers approved the signatures collected, so we did have 5% of Michigan voters signed the petition to regulate marijuana like alcohol. June 5th, the legislation decided to take no action. Now, if they had taken action on June 5th, this would not have gone to ballot. It would have just become legal, but they could have rewritten it and changed the language. Because they took no action, if we vote on this on November 6th, if it's approved as written. And it would take a 3/4 majority vote to change anything. The last time Michigan had a 3/4 majority vote was on mosquito control. That's the only time I could find it in the history of Michigan legislature. Now, that doesn't mean it's the only time they did it. It's the only time I could find it. Next one, please. So here's what it looks like. This is how we stack up to the rest of the nation. Our ballot says you can have 2.5 ounces of marijuana on your person at any given time. Now, I had no idea when I started all this what that would look like, and I really hope I never get pulled over carrying all this stuff. This is not pot. This is a look-alike. Okay, that's 2.5 ounces. You can have that on your person, in your purse, in your car, in your glove box. This makes about 100 joints depending on how you roll them. That's a lot of pot. Okay, so then I decide, okay, I want to know what this 10 ounces is, because 10 ounces is what I can have in my home. So I went to Walmart, and I got Italian seasoning. My car smells really good. Makes me want pizza. This is 10 ounces. I can have this in my house at any time. It's about 800 joints, again, depending on how you roll them. I've never rolled one, so I have no idea. So that's a lot of marijuana for personal use. So I have a friend who does use medical marijuana for pain, and I asked him, because I'm curious, how much do you use? He said, well, about an ounce a week. No, a month, excuse me, about an ounce a month. So that's a 10-month supply. Why do we need this for personal use at any given time? That's a lot. So commercialization means they can advertise. We will have billboards saying, hey, come to this dispensary, we have the best stuff. Just like we have for alcohol. And we're taxing it at 16%. Remember, we said we were going to regulate this like alcohol. We tax alcohol at 50%. Also, this is still federally illegal to sell. So none of this money can go into banks. However, credit unions, I just heard Friday, have found a way around that. So how do we know we're getting the 16% if it can't really go into banks? And I don't know how the credit union's getting around it, but they said they are. So maybe it will. How do we know for sure we're getting the 16%? The IRS can't look into it. It's still illegal. How are we going to tax it? They haven't written that in yet. So if you'll go to the next one, please. So the Michigan proposal, there is no opting out of this one. You would need a 5% majority vote. So first, the language would have to be approved. Then you would have to get the signatures, and then it would have to be on a scheduled vote. So until next November, there's no way out of this for a community. And you'd have to do everything perfectly for it to be on next year's ballot for your community to opt out. 1,000 feet from the school, and we're the only state who's decided we can have designated smoking areas. So you can go to the movie theater, and they could have a designated smoking area as you're walking in, or we can have one in the park, or maybe in the restaurant that has a patio. I mean, all it says is no unless in a designated smoking area. It doesn't say who's going to designate it. It has no laws. I mean, we have a no smoking law, but it's for tobacco. It specifically says tobacco. So we have no clue what this is going to do for our state. Next slide, please. So some of the unintended consequences, the water usage. So how many of you know that Michigan is the #1 agricultural state in the nation? I did not know that until I started doing this. Coral Beth probably knew that. She's like, yeah, I knew that. So each plant takes about 6 gallons of water a day if it's grown outdoors. That's about the same as corn. I did not know that either until I got into this. The stuff you learn. For a 150-day growing season. So if it's grown indoors, it's only about 3 gallons of water a day. This equals 450 to 900 gallons of water for one plant. That's a lot of water. In California, they've stopped growing citrus because it's more lucrative to grow marijuana, and they don't have enough water to do both. So the price of orange juice has been going up. Some of you may have noticed. I don't drink orange juice, but my husband loves it, and I have noticed. Electrical usage. I went on to Consumer's website because I'm like, I have no idea. One grow light, 600-watt bulb, takes about 5,000 kilowatt hours a year to run. The average household takes 500 to 700 kilowatt hours a month. So there's an article from Colorado, and it says it's kind of like we got 1 million new houses in 1 year. And they've had blackouts and brownouts, and so has California, and so have the other states. Washington State isn't having as much of that because their laws are much less. You can't have as much of it there, and they have much stricter laws. Next slide, please. So again, become educated. Don't take my word for it. Ballotpedia.com. Can't see that very well. Ballotpedia.org, excuse me. Decide for yourself if this is the right way to vote. Next slide, please. So how many did you eat? You knew there was going to be a quiz, right? So if you ate them all, yeah, we need to call 911. Luckily, mine are not laced with anything. Normally, one gummy bear has 10 milligrams of THC. We do this to kind of give you a visual. It's really easy to overdose on edibles. Colorado now has billboards that say, hey, if you're visiting us from out of state, take it easy with the edibles. Start out slow, be cautious. There's a billboard here in Michigan that says, opiate overdoses are 25% less in states where marijuana is legal. That is an absolutely true statistic. That has been true for 50 years. Marijuana or opiate overdoses have been higher in Michigan by 25% than all of those other states because Michigan has really high opiate overdose rates. It has nothing to do with marijuana, but they used it and they put it all together so it looks like a true fact. Well, it's true, but they really manipulated kind of what it means. There's a lot of those kind of billboards going up right now. Don't take my word for it. If you see one, look it up. Look up the information. Next slide, please. So this is all the places we got our information. I'm going to leave that one up there if you want to take a picture of it with your phone.